From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Democrats fail to act against Boebert for accusing Ilhan Omar of terrorism. Substance of Biden and Putin talk remains mystery. Richest 1% took 38% of global wealth since 1995. Study says Pfizer's vaccine provides some protection against Omicron. World's second tallest building looms over Malaysian capital. Our top story tonight. Members of the Squad lashed out at Democratic leaders on Tuesday. This was for dragging their feet in punishing Republican Lauren Boebert for her Islamophobic attacks on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Omar is one of 3 Muslims in Congress. The Squad refers to 6 Democratic representatives known for being among the most left-wing members of Congress. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi moved swiftly earlier in the year to discipline Republican Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar for promoting violent rhetoric against Democratic lawmakers. But after Boebert suggested that Congresswoman Omar poses a threat of terrorist violence because of her faith, Democratic leaders have not reacted. Squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rejected the idea, floated by some Democrats, of a broader resolution condemning Islamophobia. It would be one that does not specifically target Boebert. Ocasio-Cortez said Boebert needs to be held accountable for her actions. She, along with other members of the Squad, want Boebert booted off the House committee she currently sits on. Congressman Jamal Bowman, another member of the Squad, said failing to act against Boebert would send a horrible message to Americans, particularly Muslim Americans. The United States Department of Justice is suing to block a gerrymandered Texas congressional map. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the enforcement action on Monday under Section 2 of the Landmark Voting Rights Act. Department of Justice officials said that while the number of Latino and Black voters in Texas grew significantly over the last decade, the state's new map dilutes minority voting strength in violation of federal law. Speaking at a press conference, Garland said after the department's voting law experts assessed Texas's new redistricting plans, they found districts that violate the Voting Rights Act. A virtual call between the presidents of the United States and Russia on Tuesday ended without either revealing the content of the conversation. The White House said the call between U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin lasted over 2 hours. The call came amid reports that Russia is amassing thousands of troops near the Ukrainian border. The White House earlier said President Biden would reaffirm the United States' support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Malala Yousafzai on Monday decried the turnabout happening under Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Yousafzai met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. Speaking about equality in girls' education, Yousafzai told Blinken, Afghanistan right now is the only country where girls do not have access to secondary education. It has been nearly 100 days since the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan after a 20-year occupation. Yousafzai, quoting from a 15-year-old Afghan girl's letter, said girls' education is a powerful tool for bringing peace and security. Blinken called Yousafzai an inspiration to girls and women around the world. He promised to share the Afghan girl's letter with President Joe Biden. Since 1995, the global 1% of wealthiest people has captured 38% of all new wealth. Meanwhile, the poorest people have benefited from just 2% of new wealth. Those are 2 of the findings of the latest World Inequality Report, which provides a summary of global income and wealth data. The data spotlights the worsening gulf between the very rich and everyone else. It shows inequities in wealth and income are about as great today as they were at the peak of Western imperialism in the early 20th century. The share of income captured by the poorest half of the world's people is about half what it was in 1820, according to the report. Its authors note contemporary inequities in wealth and income are the consequence of deliberate decisions by policymakers. A report from South Africa published Tuesday found antibodies produced by vaccinated people were much less successful at keeping the COVID-19 Omicron variant from infecting cells. However, lab experiments also hinted that people who have received a booster shot might be better protected. Pfizer and Moderna are both testing their COVID-19 vaccines against Omicron. The companies have said they would be able to produce vaccines tailored to the variant in roughly 3 months. With the discovery of Omicron, stock holdings for Pfizer and Moderna skyrocketed. Their top 8 shareholders made more than $10 billion last week. Global public health advocates warn the world will keep seeing more coronavirus variants unless wealthy nations and vaccine manufacturers address vaccine inequity. The United Nations Children's Fund launched its largest single country appeal Tuesday. The agency is responding to the urgent humanitarian needs of more than 24 million people in Afghanistan, half of them children. The $2 billion appeal would help avert the collapse of health, nutrition, education, water, sanitation, and hygiene, as well as other social services for children, the agency said. Afghan families are struggling to heat their homes in harsh winter conditions. UNICEF country representative Alice Akunga said the current humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is dire, particularly for children. Akunga said without additional funding, the agency and its partners won't be able to reach the children and families that need relief. Abdurrazak Gurna, winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Literature, called attention to the condition of refugees crossing the Channel between France and the UK. The British Muslim laureate made the remarks while accepting the award on Monday.
There is something quite inhumane, I think, in the responses of these two governments, particularly, I think, of the British government, about which I know a little bit more than about what constitutes the French response to this. It's rather strange, almost, to see the language, the narrative that is constructed against or about these attempts to cross.
On Tuesday, Israel announced the completion of a barrier along the Gaza border. Described as an iron wall, the 40-mile barrier is equipped with underground sensors, a 19-foot-high smart fence, radars, cameras, and a maritime monitoring system. Israel has maintained a blockade on Gaza since 2007. It restricts the flow of goods and people in and out of the occupied territory, home to about 2 million people. The new barrier is in addition to the wall that runs along the occupied West Bank. Human Rights Watch has called Israel an apartheid regime because of its network of walls, roads, checkpoints, and laws. Citibank in Bangladesh launched its redesigned Sharia-based Islamic banking service on Saturday. Citi Islamic was unveiled at a news conference at the Westin Hotel in the capital, Dhaka. Customers can now access Islamic and conventional banking services at its more than 150 branches and sub-branches nationwide. They will be able to access Islamic banking services through Citibank's digital banking app called CitiTouch. Citibank also introduced American Express Islamic credit and debit cards at the event. Its new banking system allows customers access to personal and corporate banking and trade. Former chairperson of an Indian Shia Waqf board, Wasim Rizvi, has renounced Islam, converting to Hinduism. The cleric was known for his attacks on Muslims before his conversion. According to Indian media reports, the cleric was converted to Hinduism by Yati Narsingahand. Narsingahand is the extremist head priest of the Dasna Devi Hindu temple in Ghaziabad. After conversion, Rizvi adopted the name Jitendra Narayan Singh Tyagi. He said that he chose December 6 to convert to Hinduism, as it was on this day in 1992 that the Babri Mosque was demolished in Ayodhya. Rizvi is the former chairman of the Uttar Pradesh Shia Central Waqf Board, a post he held for over a decade until last year. A 118-story skyscraper looming over Malaysia's capital Kuala Lumpur is set to become the world's second tallest building. The structure, which will be more than 2,000 feet high, will be completed next year. Merdeka 118 stands higher than China's 2,073-foot Shanghai Tower and is dwarfed only by Dubai's Burj Khalifa. Malaysian Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob described the project as an iconic tower for the future at a ceremony Tuesday marking the completion of the skyscraper's spire. He said it strengthens Malaysia's position as a modern and developed country. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In Muslim news, we cover the story of Christians killed by police in Nagaland. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Indian military has just killed 14 Christians in Nagaland. Nagaland is one of the few Indian states where Christians are a majority. In Nagaland, about 88%. And they were killed by military commandos. And defying curfew, hundreds of Naga people showed up for the funeral of these people, including the chief minister, who joined them later, and he demanded that India cancels the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So what is happening in India to minorities? What's happening to Christians? Why people are killed by the government laws, which their chief minister is saying need to be cancelled. To discuss all of that with us is a person who is a Catholic priest in India, based in Ahmedabad, India. And he is at the same time human rights activist and peace activist. It is my honor to have with me Father Cedric Prakash.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here on your show, but the subject is very painful. It's about a terrible tragedy that has fallen over India a couple of days ago on Saturday.
Tell us what is happening actually in Nagaland. Why 14 Christians were just murdered like that?
See, I think we need to look at the big picture. And Nagaland, where the majority definitely are Christian, and what you call the Seven Sister States, and the whole insurgency over years to establish what you call a Greater Nagaland, which includes even part of Myanmar and so on. And the government from many years was not willing to get into it. And then from 1958, we have had this, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which gives the right to the army to enter any civilian home, arrest them, to kill them, unbridled, unlimited powers. Now, on Saturday, these groups of civilians were, apparently they were mainly Christian, were returning from a coal mine. They had gone to earn their hard-earned, and their truck was ambushed. There was absolutely nothing on them. And first of all, 6 or 8 civilians were killed on the spot. And then later on, in an encounter with the army, about 8 more were killed, about 14 to 15, the numbers are varying. But this is tragic, a tragedy of immense proportion. And definitely the government of India and the armed forces need to take responsibility for this.
Do you think taking responsibility will include punishing those who ordered these people to be killed?
Yes, definitely. for any draconian law, for any anti-people law, for any anti-constitutional law, like we have had the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, and several other laws, the sedition laws and so on. People are using these laws, those in power, those who control this regime, the regime itself, to quell dissent, to quell voices, to kill innocent people. So three things we say have to be done, whether it's for the AFSPA, for the UAPA, or for anything else. First of all, do a thorough investigation immediately. The Home Minister has gone on record in Parliament yesterday saying that a special investigation team will be appointed and they will be giving a report in 1 month's time. For us, it is too long. Everybody knows the truth of all this and what happens in these cases. But investigate it thoroughly. The Chief Minister of Nagaland himself has spoken out. Secondly, once the investigation is done, bring to book the perpetrators of the crime. We have had, say, the Gujarat genocide of 2002. I was there in the midst of it. And the perpetrators, the real criminals, are still just roaming out the country with impunity and with immunity. And that is important. So unless the perpetrators are brought to book and given suitable punishment for these dastardly, heinous crimes, nothing perhaps is going to change. And the third is, there is something like restorative justice. You cannot bring these 14 bodies back to life. They have been killed. These are poor people. These are ordinary people. Their loved ones have lost the breadwinner of the family. So there has to be something what is called restorative justice. Pay due compensation immediately. We have under the UAPA some languishing in jail for years. They have not been given bail, and when they have been released, there is no compensation being given. They have lost a good part of their lives. Their livelihood has been destroyed. There is a kind of stigma put on them. When are these going to change? Unless the law and order mechanism takes responsibility for these issues and ensure that justice is not delayed or denied in any way to the victims of these heinous acts.
Father Prakash is a Catholic priest and a human rights activist joining us from Ahmedabad, India. Please share this with me. These laws which you mentioned, which authorizes the military to enter any home, kill anybody, and with full impunity, are these laws only in Nagaland part of India, or these laws are found other places in India?
These laws are found in Jammu and Kashmir. For some time they were there in Punjab, but it was mainly in Nagaland in the northeast. In places like Tripura, when the BJP came to power, they have been repealed, but they have been used very selectively, and the people who have been targeted have been innocent people. Have been people in most cases who have been ordinary rural people and so on. And, you're trying to quell what is called the so-called Maoist insurgency in India. But you don't use these draconian laws. Even the United Nations, Commissioner for Human Rights and so on, over the years have asked, the special rapporteurs have asked that these laws, especially the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, be repealed, be revoked. We are demanding that the UAPA also be revoked. These are laws which are not merely draconian. They are used in a very selective manner, in a selective way, and the people who are targeted are mainly minorities. And this is for the whole world to see. It is not used on the majority community, on the people who create a lot of other terrorist activities in the country. Just yesterday, in a place in Madhya Pradesh, the right-wing Hindu elements went and stoned a school. The children were sitting for their exams. They broke the windows. It is all there in the mainstream media. And these people will get away, we know, with immunity and with impunity. They will do whatever they want. Representations of the Catholic community have gone and met the Home Minister today. He said he will look into the matter. But there are any amount of incidents happening in this country, in India, to the Muslim minority all the time, and now in a very, very big way also to the Christian minority. And this the world should know.
So if these laws are essentially enforced, draconian laws, which just with impunity and nothing going to happen when you... So these laws need to be challenged in the court system. So you being Father Prakash, a human rights activist as well, has there been an effort to question and challenge these laws to declare them unconstitutional? Indian Constitution, which I have read, does not allow anyone to kill anyone and live happily ever after.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. These laws are being challenged in the courts, whether it is the AFSPA. There was this woman who has been, Sharmila Iram, who has been fasting for years for the withdrawal of it. She spent any amount of years fasting, and the people of the place of Nagaland, of Manipur, the local tribal, the ethnic groups, and so on, have been protesting. They have been in the high courts, in the Supreme Court, any amount of petitions for the withdrawal, for the immediate revocation of all these laws. Unfortunately, the government over the years have had its way on these very, very antiquated colonial laws, which should be done away with. These were used in terms of the freedom struggle by the British against the Indians. A government doesn't use these laws against its own people. Okay, there is sufficient amount of checks and balances within the Criminal Code of Procedure, within the CRPC, to be able to address any kind of violence, any kind of insurgency. You don't need these special powers that give the right either to the law enforcement mechanism, to the police or to the army to do what they want. And unfortunately, we have had so many fake encounters. We have seen them in Gujarat, where at that time, even the Home Minister presided over these fake encounters, where young, innocent Muslims were killed, and with all kind of, wild allegations, which could not be proved in any court of law. And we have had so many people lying incarcerated, including the Jesuit priest, Father Stan Swami, who died, on the 5th of July this year, after being for more than 8 months in jail. And still, they have not proved him innocent. They have not declared him innocent. Now we have to fight the case. There are any amount. Today, Sudha Bharadwaj, another human rights activist, a great lawyer, the Supreme Court finally said that they respect the decision of the High Court, of the Bombay High Court, granting a bail. And the National Investigation Agency went to protest in the Supreme Court that bail should not be given. These are absolutely ridiculous. A top justice like Justice Krishna Iyer has very, very clearly said that the rule for anyone who's alleged a criminal should be bail, not jail, unless he or she is proved guilty. But what is happening through these very special laws, these draconian laws, people are incarcerated, kept in jail without trial, killed in encounters, and even, as I said earlier, to the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, they can go and investigate and shoot any civilian, as we have seen in this recent incident on last Saturday in Nagaland.
Why do you think, Father Prakash, the Christian world does not speak up for Indian Christians when they are attacked like this or lynched, and the judicial and legal processes are not available for them?
Good. We live in a world today of trade, a highly mercenary world. This has nothing to do with Christian. The same thing can be applied for Muslims, when Muslims are being butchered in our country, which Muslim nation spoke out? This is not today. We don't have Christian nations. We have democracies where perhaps the majority of people are Christians. Some people have voiced some opinion, but it's a human rights issue. Don't speak out for India because somebody is a Christian as being attacked, or don't speak out for India because somebody is a Muslim who's being attacked. There is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On the 10th of December, we celebrate another anniversary of this great charter of 1948, 10th December 1948. And I think for us, every single nation of the world should be, who is a signatory to this charter, should be able to take a visible and vocal stand, irrelevant of what the religion is. If the people in Nagaland are killed, civilians, ordinary poor people, the international community should speak out. If people have been killed in the Gujarat carnage, as I have witnessed and many of my colleagues have witnessed, the people of the world should speak out. And it's not merely a Muslim nation speaking out for Muslims or a Christian so-called nation speaking out for Christians. This is a charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which should be the integral part of the DNA of every single citizen of the world, of every single nation. So it doesn't matter whether something is happening in Palestine or Nagaland, or for that matter in Colombia. My voice, it should be for every single of the citizen of this world, is to speak for the voiceless.
Well, thank you so much. Well said. Father Cedric Prakash is joining us from Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Tell us this. Are the human rights activists and activism and organization growing in India as need seems to be rising for more of their work?
Oh, well, yes and no. The government has very effectively quelled dissent. They have, when journalists speak out, journalists are killed, they are incarcerated, false cases are foisted on them. For human rights defenders, we have false cases. Many of them, like Father Stan Swami, we know, have been languishing in jail. So there is a sense of fear. But fortunately, there are many, many human rights activists who are very clear that whatever the consequences, whatever the price that one has to pay, they will stand up for truth, for justice, for the human rights of every single citizen of the country, very especially for the poor and the marginalized, the excluded and exploited of India.
Thank you so much, Father Prakash, for your time. We truly appreciate that. And I hope you will remain safe and productive for the human rights of all people in India.
Yes, we need to pray for one another, and we need to ensure that the rights of all citizens are respected and promoted everywhere.
Thank you. Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.